Okay, hush now. Listen closely. Welcome to this explainer. I'm your host, but today, right now, I need you to think of me as the ancient gardener, the one who actually survived to tell you this incredibly grim, dark tale. We're about to take a deep dive into philosophical horror, literally a descent into the deepest, most terrifying mechanisms of the human will. Our focus today is the alchemy of the internal spark. I know, it sounds kind of hopeful, right? Well, don't let that fool you. What we're about to explore is an absolute tragedy, a horrific miracle. I tended the twisted roots of this nightmare myself, and I urgently need to explain the anatomy of a soul being forged in complete, absolute darkness. So stay with me, because the darkness, it's already waiting.
The uncanny forest did not grow, it festered. You really cannot grasp the terror of this story unless you understand the actual soil it sprang from. I tended this place, well, actually scratch that, if you can even call it a place. The trees there weren't just wood. They were deeply ribbed, twisting up like giant human torsos frozen in pure agony. And the leaves, they didn't rustle, they whispered. They literally whispered the forgotten names of people swallowed by the freezing fog that permanently choked the air. This wasn't just nature. It was an environment of active, malicious rot.
To survive a place like that, travelers leaned entirely on what's known as the Great Dialectic. This was just the rhythm of the predictable rising sun. Basically, the high oppressive walls of the world would bless the valley every single morning with just a tiny sliver of light. To walk into those woods meant surrendering completely to the collective dark. You huddled down, you waited passively, and you prayed for some external salvation. You just let the world dictate your reality. You are a passive observer, waiting for the sun to save you. And that was the absolute, unspoken rule of the valley. Okay, let's dive into this, because that absolute rule gets completely shattered. Out of nowhere, step by step, a solitary figure walks out of the freezing fog and fractures this stagnant, terrifying piece. I actually watched him approach through those twisted trunks. And he wasn't cowering. He wasn't waiting for the morning light like everyone else. He was carrying a glass lantern. And inside, it wasn't just a regular fire. It was literally a splinter of lightning caged in iron. Just by bringing his own illumination, he was breaking the fundamental laws of the forest.
Act 1. The Sovereign Light. So we're going to map this horrific fable using the Fichtean dialectic, stepping through these philosophical stages of creation and destruction. This torchbearer, he completely embodied the thesis. He was this unstoppable force of pure, independent ego. I mean, he walked with this staggering, almost blinding arrogance, existing entirely on his own terms in absolute defiance of the void around him. I stood right in his path, my hands literally shaking. I begged him. I tried to warn him about the ancient cosmic horrors waiting in the festering woods, pleading with him to just put out his light and wait for dawn.
Now, what's really interesting about this is his response. It was chilling. He just gives me this hollow smile and says, "I fear no fate, for what is a fate but a story we tell ourselves?" He looked right at me and told me his sun wasn't the mountain's sun. It wasn't the valley's sun. His sun was entirely his own. He truly believed his consciousness, his internal fire, was the absolute center of reality, and he was carrying it right into the abyss.
So, we're faced with this incredibly stark contrast. On one side, you have the predictable, rising sun. That represents passive, external salvation, right? The collective relying on the world to provide light. But on the other side, we have this splinter of lightning. This represents the aggressive, independent, solitary ego, a man demanding, literally demanding, that the universe bend to the light he brought into it. It was beautiful, sure, but a terrifying defiance. And here's the thing. Defiance in the uncanny forest never goes unanswered.
Which drags us into Act 2, the swallowing gloom.
The forest absolutely felt his arrogance. Those festering woods weren't about to just sit quietly and let a foreign light pierce their fog. The environment reacted violently. The forest became the ultimate antithesis, the non-ego. It was pure cosmic indifference, this colossal, sprawling nightmare rising up to just crush the solitary ego. The world demanded absolute submission. It was out to prove that human will, no matter how bright or arrogant, is just a temporary speck against the crushing weight of cosmic indifference.
I watched from the safety of the perimeter as the retaliation kicked in. And let me tell you, it was mounting horror that I will never, ever scrape out of my brain. The shadows themselves physically grew teeth, violently snapping at the edges of his lantern's light. The freezing fog thickened up, turning into this heavy, liquid ash that coated his skin, his lungs, everything. Above him, those ribbed, torso-like trees started twisting together into an oppressive canopy that literally strangled the sky. The forest was rising up to completely devour him.
So his internal certainty was suddenly slammed right into its violent opposite. The forest started throwing these suffocating, howling winds against his fragile glass lantern. It absolutely refused to be mastered by a single soul. I watched his solitary fire, his ego, his thesis, start to flicker. It bled against the glass. It choked in the ash. The external light he was so incredibly proud of, it was failing him. The antithesis was winning.
And out of that violent collision, we reach the climax of our descent. Act 3, the internal spark.
Let's move to and see how this builds into the synthesis. Because in Fishenian terms, the thesis and antithesis, they can't just coexist, they have to synthesize or completely annihilate each other. The external fire, the lantern, it just couldn't survive the forest. It was an impossible standoff. So to survive, the torchbearer was forced into this desperate, completely unthinkable choice. He had to grimly forge himself and the horrific world together, right there in the crushing dark.
And here is the visceral, horrific transformation my traumatized eyes actually witnessed. When he realized the glass would shatter and the wind would kill his spark, he didn't run. Step 1, he broke the lantern himself. Step 2, with his hands bleeding, he picked up that dying, lightning-hot ember and he swallowed it. He literally swallowed the fire. Step 3, he allowed himself to fully merge with the terror of the forest. And step 4, his very anatomy ceased to be human. It became a vessel for the spark. He internalized the dialectic.
The physical changes were terrifying to watch. Just beneath his skin, his veins started glowing like burning molten copper. You could see the heat hollowing him out from the inside. His eyes, which were once so full of this arrogant pride, they just burned away and turned entirely to gray ash. He was consumed. He was destroyed. And yet, miraculously, I heard his boots crunch on the frozen dirt. He kept walking.
And this brilliantly illustrates the Fichtean synthesis completing itself. He was no longer a man fighting the woods, but he wasn't conquered by them either. The conflict was transcended entirely. The thesis and the antithesis annihilated each other to create something entirely new, something terrifyingly whole.
He became the living dark that burns from within, a horrific, beautiful unity of self and world. He took the pure indifference of the forest and the absolute will of his own ego and fused them into a single being. He was the darkness, but he was also the light. The synthesis was perfectly, brutally complete.
Conclusion: the irony of truth.
So the torchbearer achieved exactly what he set out to do, right? He brought his own sun into the abyss. He achieved ultimate mastery. But the devastating irony here is that he could only pull this off through the complete, total destruction of his original self. He had to burn himself alive from the inside out just to avoid being snuffed out by the world. So, as the gardener who watched the ash fall from his burning eyes, I want to leave you with this unsettling question to ponder in your own darkness. To survive the cosmic indifference of the world, what parts of yourself must you destroy to become your own light? Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Keep your lanterns close.